Did you know a USA Today article came out 2 or 3 years ago? It was published in a Gallup poll of 153,000 American workers, and it was shocking. 70% of them actually hate their jobs. If you think about that, that's 7 out of 10 people. And maybe some of us are in that room, in that chair tonight, where we don't like what we're doing. And it stated a lot of different reasons, but I believe there's 2 fundamental reasons why. Number one, we haven't discovered our true passion in life. We haven't taken our strengths and applied them to the marketplace, and we're not doing work we love. And number 2 is we haven't learned really career development. We haven't aced the job interview. Talked to a lot of people that have been out of the job place. They might have just got laid off. 10 years, job interviewing has changed a lot, and they struggle. Or maybe somebody's in a company right now, and they don't really know how to take that next step. We're going to go over that today. So I hope to help teach you some things with number 2, the job interview and career development, and also encourage you with number 1 in discovering work you love. So a lot of people say, how can I relate to audiences? They ask me that over and over. And it's simple. Most of the time I've been on your side of the table. So instead of being the interviewer, I've been the interviewee. So I know everything you're feeling when you job interview. Actually, it took me 250 tries with over 50 companies before I landed my very first opportunity. So you talk about failure, I've been the failure. So some of these techniques I can teach you about today are from my side of the table and now from being and looking at candidates. So there's a couple things. All talks need objectives for you to take back and to apply in your own settings. Here's what I want you to take back. It's simple. 1 or 2 things you can do in your own career development, your job interviewing, that you can take back and apply. And that's really it. That's the goal of today's talk. The book is based on 3 phases. The first phase is all about what you do before the job interview. So if you think about it, my book is 200 pages and 94 pages is phase 1. So what you do before the job interview is actually going to matter a lot. Then we talk about the during phase, what you do during. And a lot of people just do phase 1 and 2, but they don't know how to do phase 3. And that's finish the interview and do what to do after that. So as we break down phase 1, we think about this. It kind of looks a little kindergartenish. And a lot of people say this, but really it starts out with you guys. You think about it, if you don't like something you do, you're not going to be passionate about it. It comes off in your attitude. It comes off in if you really want something. If you really want a job, then you're going to do it all stops to overcome that career development. That's the beauty about it. Discover your passion. That's what I encourage you to do. Find work you love, find your strengths, and go about to do that, and you'll win in the marketplace. All this stuff's on the website. Free resources on how tangible ways to go in career development and discover your passion. I don't have the time tonight to go through all this, but I would love for you to challenge you to go to topthehotseat.com and find true ways on how to do that. So networking. I go to a lot of places and they want me to do networking events and people show up, but the common theme is, what is networking? Everyone's told to do that at some level, but I don't think we've taught people really what that means. And even when I go to networking event, I don't think people still know what that means. They just show up and friendly and, oh, hi, how are you? Thank you. Do you have a job for me? It's not really how networking works. If you look at quotes around networking, this is my favorite one. It's about teaching and giving. Teaching someone about yourself, learning about them. It's a relationship. It's not, can I have a job? Can I have a job? Can I get a job? Can I get a job? Can you do something for me? It's about having a network of trust that you are invested in their career goals like you're invested in your own. And that's what networking is and the part of it. So really, you think about it, if the people with the signs would come up, I handed out some signs, just come up real quick. So this is 4 types of networking. So instead of going through all these networking, I'm going to actually show you how I got my very first opportunity in pharmaceutical sales, a very difficult industry to get into. So you start off with it, and I started at the gym, and I worked out with Joseph. And instead of me going to Joseph and saying, you know, Joseph, I really want to get into pharmaceutical sales, I don't know how to do it, Joseph sells insurance, so it has nothing to do with career. But we were able to establish a relationship at the gym. I was invested in his career goals, like what he wanted to do eventually, and he was invested in mine over a period of time. So he eventually trusted me enough to introduce me to me, his brother. Just so happens his brother, Kirk, right in the middle, works in pharmaceutical sales. So I start talking to Kirk. I form that relationship. I'm invested in Kirk's development too. Where do you want to eventually be, Kirk? He wanted to eventually own his own company. So I was very supportive of those goals, and we started establishing a relationship. So he trusted my character enough to say, you know what, you should really talk to my partner, Tina. She works for my company, and there's an opening in that area, and she could maybe give you more insights on the company. So Tina, I call her up. I give her a value add. After a while, I say, you know what do you struggle with, Tina? What are you looking for in a partner? Where do you want to be when you go on into your career? Where do you want to be eventually? So Tina was a great help. Began establishing a relationship with her. And then she said, you should give me your resume. Well, I went to Ben, my mom's neighbor's mother's son, who worked for Stryker. And I knew him since he was a kid. And I said, do you mind to look over my resume? He said, sure, no problem. He looked over it, he said, wow, this really sucks. So he was able to help me with pointers on it, fix it up. And then Tina turned to my resume to the hiring manager, Nana. So instead of me going in blind with Nana, I actually called one of my old hiring managers, Peter. It was a gas station, and he was a manager of several gas stations. And I worked part-time in college at a gas station. And many people trivialize what they do in their careers, but guess what? That was a lot of responsibility for that job. So Peter actually called Nana to tell her that I had the greatest work ethic he's ever seen. So before I even get into the job interviewing chair with Nana, all these people in the networking are working behind the scenes to get me a job. Now, how is that going to fare when some stranger comes off the street that doesn't know anybody? All these people helped me get the job. Thank you guys so much. I was recently interviewed on WBIR, NBC News, and they said, what's the one thing that you recommend to students or professionals when it comes to job interviewing? And I said, it's simple. It's mock interviewing. Mock interviewing is where you sit down with a professional and you learn all your mistakes and you learn what good is during that service. What do I mean? So a lot of candidates that don't get moved forward in job interviewing process are repeating bad answers. How are you going to know if it's a bad answer unless you work with a professional to know what a good answer looks like? So if you work with a professional, you do a live mock interviewing session, you dress the part. I get to dress like this tonight because I'm not interviewing. And then you dress the part, you get in, and you're able to ace that. Think what you'll do in your own professional setting. We do mannerisms that we don't realize. We all have annoying things we say. We have annoying personalities. We have annoying gestures. It's good to see that on camera. And we look at ourselves and we're like, wow, that's bad. Let's fix that. I actually mock interviewed for the first time a few years after college. I didn't believe my career instructors when they told me to do it, and I finally did it. They stopped the tape after 5 minutes and they said, okay, Zach, let's stop. And I thought I was doing great. Said, you said the past 150 times in 5 minutes. So there's habits that we do that we can catch with that. What else can we catch? You think about this. If you're able to give good answers, think about what you'll do when you get in that hiring manager's. It gives you that confidence. Also with dress, I'm amazed at what people wear to job interviews nowadays. It's absolutely amazing. A lot of people come in like this young lady right here, like this young man right here, in things that you would never dress for a job interview. So think about your dress. It really shows a first impression. If you wear something to a mock interview, that professional can tell you if that's professional or not. But it's pretty common sense. A very conservative suit, very conservative tie, and that's examples of where you would want to dress. So you think about this, I tell candidates all the time, a lot of them will show up with a resume in their hand, and they show up to the job interview, and I call it an interview kit. It's really a nice leather-bound portfolio book. It's a notepad, and it's got questions in it where you prepare to ask the hiring manager things that you would like to ask after the interview. It's got pens in it, so you almost bring a kit. A lot of times you'll group interview and not know it. You'll say you'll be meeting with Charles. You'll get there and 3 other people will be there. So have several copies of your resume. Company research. That's where it comes in to have these key contacts. How many of you have LinkedIn? Anybody? Great, that's awesome. Most of you do. LinkedIn is the way of the future. It really is. It's a way where I showed you all this. You can do it on virtually online. You can connect to people that are at that company or in that industry. And guess what? If they love their job, they're probably willing to help you. And if they say no, what's the big deal? You've asked. So you get a key contact. They can tell you a lot about the company. So yeah, you can Google it and get information there and do your homework about the company and about the position, but you can learn a lot from people that work at the company or in the industry. You can learn the weaknesses of the company. So you have a little bit inside track on the actual job. So let's talk about the during. What you do during. How many of you have heard of the STAR format when it comes to interviewing? Anybody? So the STAR format is real simple. It's situation, task, action, result. It's how you form your questions in the interview process. Situational behavioral questions, as your incomes and your careers go up, these questions will be more prominent. These questions include, so name a time you had to deal with a difficult boss. Tell me about that situation. How did you handle it? What did you do? What was the outcome? Name a time you've had to work in a team and somebody wasn't pulling their weight. How did you confront them? What did the group do? So there are situational behavioral questions that actually happen to you in the marketplace. And this is a great format on how to answer these type questions. It is STAR. So think about it real easy. This is how you format it. The situation is quite simply the challenge. What the challenge or the problem is you're trying to solve. The task, what you're given to solve, what you have to do to achieve that result. And then the action, what you do in that situation, and then your result, right? And hopefully it's a positive result from your action. So if you go ahead and look here, here's an example. Name a time you've had to deal with a difficult customer. You don't have to read all this. I can sum it up pretty easy. So basically, we've got a mad customer. I'm a customer service rep. We've got a really ticked off customer. So the situation and the challenge is this customer's mad. They didn't get their order in time. They're getting ready to dump our company and forget about them. So that's the challenge. The task. So I'm a customer service representative. My task is I've got to calm this customer down or we're going to lose business, and I got to find out some way to retain them. Action. What was the action I did? Well, I apologized to the customer. I said, I'm really sorry this happened. I gave them a discount. I offered them free shipping. I held their hand all the way until they got their order. What was the result of that? I kept their business. They stayed loyal. They were our #1 customer for the rest of the time I was there at the company. So it's quite simply summing it up. Here's the answers to the test. This is kind of cool. So when I interview people, it's kind of cool because we can hire third-party companies and we can tell them what we're looking for. We're looking for somebody that knows collaboration. And then they can derive 30 to 40 questions based on that theme on situational behavioral interviewing. These themes that you're looking at right here are the answers to your test. So think about it. Communication, teamwork. Teamwork you can ask 30 or 40 questions on. Name a time you've had to work in a team and you felt like you were doing all the work. How did you eventually handle that situation? What was the end result? How did you achieve the project? Name a time you've had to work cross-functionally in a company and you couldn't get somebody to do something. How did you handle that? What did you do? So there's a lot of things from these themes. These are your answers to the test. And if you have solid answers and you've practiced them, then just think how good you're going to be when you go out and job interview. Another thing behind this, there's a study by California State University that is a study with visuals and senses. You've all heard if you use all your senses, people remember things more. Visuals and speaking and hearing and tasting and sound, all those make memorable experiences. 70% of people remembered something if they saw it too and they heard it. So think about that. If you had something to back up your accomplishments during the interview process, think how powerful that is to hiring managers. So if they ask you, name a time you had to take a leadership role. What was that leadership role? How did you handle the situation? What was the challenge? What was the end result? And you've got a leadership award sitting on your desk in a portfolio book, and you're able to flip through it and say, yeah, exactly. In 2017, I won a leadership award, and here's the proof, and then you talk behind it. It sends a powerful message. Now, do you flip through the book the whole time the interviewer is talking? No, you know exactly where to go on these specific examples. I always tell candidates to put together a brag book, a portfolio, if you will, and bring it to the job interviewing. What can you bring in your portfolio? There's tons of things. People don't realize every day you could have something in your portfolio. If you're working on a project and a teammate says, great job on this project, print that baby out. That's a great example to put in your brag book. Performance reviews, you can put them in there. Things that you needed to work on, some of the improvements you've made over your careers, awards, certifications, any educational stuff. You put it together in a nice leather-bound portfolio book, and you're able to show the interviewer as you give examples. It's very powerful. We're going to go over through these, if you stick around, these questions a little bit more in depth and actually practice some of these. But does anybody know from these questions what the #1 most asked job interviewing question is in North America from these questions? That's it. Tell me about yourself. That's the #1 most asked question in North America. And we're going to tackle some of these things. What do you think candidates struggle with the most out of all these? That's one of them, but what question up here, it really just, you can even Google it, it has a wrong answer. Your weaknesses. Many candidates struggle with that. So we've got a workshop actually to address that tonight. Ask for the job. So you're getting ready to go through it, you've done all your homework, you're assertive, you've asked the good questions, and you come down to the end and you don't close the deal. I always tell candidates, you don't have to say, look, do I have the job or not? That's not what I mean by asking for the job. You can ask for it very subtly. Hey, I'm really excited about your company. Thank you for giving me this chance to interview today. I really appreciate it. I just want to know, what's the next steps? Are you planning to interview more candidates? Is there anything holding me back from moving on to the next step? I really want to work here. When is your decision by? When do you plan on making the decision? Really soft-ended questions that close the deal really show that you want the job. Do you have to say, look, can I have the job or not? No, but you soften your approach. And then you know, because a lot of candidates at the end, they say, well, Zach, I haven't heard back in 2 weeks, and they were supposed to get back with me within a week. Those are good questions to ask, what the process looks like. If they don't answer within a certain time, when can I contact them? How can I contact them? And why? This just shows how long, if you really do a thorough interview, that studies show that you really work on a professional interview, and it takes a while of being prepared. Now, this sounds a bit dramatic, but you think about it. To really prepare for a job interview, you do your mock interviews, you do professional development, you do all these things, you network. It's a lot of work, but it only takes you 5 minutes to close the deal at the end and ask for the job. So, questions to ask the hiring manager. You're beginning to come down to the end, and the hiring manager says, do you have any questions for me? The worst answer you can have is, no, I don't, because that shows you're not very interested. So I always tell people to use the drag method. You want to demonstrate your interest first for the employer. Demonstrate that you're truly interested by asking questions. You reveal yourself. How much homework have you done on the company? You'd be amazed how impressed a hiring manager would be if you can say, instead of saying, so what's one of the areas at your company that you struggle at? What about reframing that question to say, yeah, I was doing a little research, I was talking to Tina, and I noticed that sales didn't really perform for XYZ product in the fourth quarter. Actually, it was down 19.3%. And I was wondering from your strategic outlook and your overview on this website that you were planning to move in more of the plastics model. You were going to start selling those to different hospitals. So I was wondering, what do you think challenges faces you for 2018 based on that business being lacking on that 19.3%? What can you do to turn that around since that's my division? It's a lot more powerful than just saying, what's one of the weaknesses at your company? To really reveal what you've done during the job interview process. It allows you to learn. Think about this, you don't want to work for a company that you really don't like. A lot of people get disappointed because they didn't get the job. Sometimes it's a blessing in disguise. If you're asking the right questions, you know what you're getting yourself into. Well, why did the last person leave? What does good look like after 3 years? You start to ask these questions and figure out if it's truly a role that you want to do. And finally, give. It gives the opportunity to sell yourself further. So you can really sell yourself by certain answers you give. So for example, you back up your qualifications and you ask a question based off that. So Mr. Hire Manager, I took a leadership role last year. I was actually in management and sat on a panel and figured out different hires for this process. I was wondering, is there any developmental areas at this company that I could do? Because I think I'll come in and do a really good job, but I'd love to move into leadership. Is there opportunities to advance? So that shows again that you're giving them, selling them interests. Do not ask about money to the hiring manager. I know that seems like common sense, but it's continually done. People want to talk about money. HR normally does the money. They make the decisions on the process. If you're chosen, the salary will come up. Then you can handle that. Benefits too. How does my 401k look here? That all again is done by HR typically. Have that conversation with HR, not your hiring manager. These are just some great questions you can ask. Are these the questions you should always ask? No. It depends on your job interview and what you're doing. But great questions at the end of the interview can seal your deal. Let me give you an example. I was interviewing for Bosch and Lomb and it came down to 3 candidates. It was it started off with 180 candidates. 180. And it got down to 3 candidates. We were all pretty equally qualified. And you never know how much time the hiring manager allows for questions. You really don't. But I didn't realize it, but I had tons of questions. I always have more than enough. And guess what? The interview actually extended out 2 extra hours because of my preparedness to ask questions. He was willing to sit there and listen. He loved that and enjoyed it. Now, some interviews you go to, they say, look, I've got 5 minutes, ask your questions. But some interviewers, we don't know these blocks of time. Maybe that's a good time to get to know the interviewer and the company a lot more involved, in depth. Finally, the phase 3, what you do after the interview, what really matters. It's amazing to me that post-interview contact has gotten so poor over the time with professional job interviewing. We really close the interview and we think it's all over. It's just really begun. And let me show you why. So I'm actually going to read this and take the time out to do it because this is an actual thank you letter, I kid you not, from a friend of mine that's a hiring manager in Houston, Texas. It says, Dear Ms. Smith, thank you for interviewing me today. Have a good weekend. Don't drink too much like I will, TTYL. This is an actual thank you letter by a candidate. So don't write one if you're going to do this, but a thank you letter really does seal the deal. Think about this. People ask me, does it really matter? Yes, it does, because you get one first impression. The competition is fierce out there. As your pay goes up, the job interviewers get tough. So one way to differentiate yourselves among the competition is a thank you letter, and a properly written thank you letter that really helps the hiring manager learn more about you. Don't worry about the content, but just worry about some things right here. So this is an actual thank you letter I wrote to a hiring manager. And what a thank you letter does, it again seals the deal. It gives them your qualifications in hard print that they can see. It shows you paid attention during the interview process. If they really harp on something they're excited about, write that down. If they say, I'm so excited our company developed this software last year, it means a lot to me because my team worked so hard on that. Write that down. Include it in your thank you letter. That's something they're passionate about. It would be nice to mention that during your process. Thank you letters can also do something else. They can overcome objections. Had an interview and the hiring manager really cornered me. I said, is there anything holding me back from moving on to the next step? He said, yeah, there is. He said, I really don't understand how you organize your business. I said, okay, instead of getting defensive, I just said, okay, I'm sorry I wasn't clear about that. Let me go back through and show you how I do that, how I pick my targets, how I go see these people. I thought I gave a pretty good explanation. It was 10 minutes. And he said, oh, I kind of understand it a little better, but I can kind of read that as emotional intelligence. He wasn't really convinced, right? So we moved on, but I kept that in the back of my mind because I knew that might be something that tripped me up. So I went back home that night and I wrote up an 8-page business plan on how exactly I organize my business from a sales territory standpoint. And I sent it in to him. I said, I apologize for being not being clear, but I wanted to show you how I organize my business more detail. Don't just think thank you letters can be just an email. They can be documents supporting what you talked about or an objection that you face. If they say, I'm not sure you have enough leadership experience, maybe that's something you can work in your thank you letter and incorporate some document supporting you do have leadership and talk around that. And really thank them, summarize it, and let them know your strengths at the end. Debates about this. Should it be handwritten or should it be emailed? How many of you say it should be emailed? How many of you say handwritten? How many of you say both? Both. It sets you apart from your competition. It really does. People argue, they say, well, my handwriting's really bad. Well, my handwriting's the worst out of everybody's, I promise. A couple of sentences on a handwritten note really does make a difference. If you slip it under the door where you're interviewing. A lot of people say, well, how can I, do I send it through the mail? Most of the time, people are not at their physical offices anymore. So if you send it via snail mail, they're not going to get it. So what you have to do is you take the thank you card with you, you take time and you write a couple of sentences down. Thank you for, it doesn't have to be War and Peace. It can be 3 or 4 sentences. You put it in a thank you letter card. And if you're at a hotel, you slip it under the door where you've interviewed. If you're at the company, give it to the receptionist. Have a conversation with them and give it to them. Or if you're at a meeting and you're interviewing with them, leave it under the door at the meeting. It's quite common in certain industries for them to do that. In other industries, it's not. So it really stands out. Also, email. Your email is your more thorough one, like this. Your handwritten's more of an exercise that you did it. You can really set yourself apart. So when do you send these? There's a lot of things out there that used to be, the age of emails didn't exist, so you had to do it handwritten, or you had to type it up. Really, thank you letters shouldn't be 1 week. It's too long. 48 hours, maybe. 24 hours is generally the standard rule. After you job interview, a 24-hour follow-up. I try to do it in 12 hours, but I'm a nerd. And I figure that it's another way to set yourself apart among the competition, that you're excited about the job. Some people say, well, does that show desperation? Not really, because we're on our phones all the day anyway. Think about it. We're always got our phones in front of us, a computer, an iPad. Technology's right at our fingertips. Again, I talked about this a little bit beforehand. Think about this. So you're nearing the end of the interview, and you've got questions to ask and you get them all done. These are great questions to follow up, and you're actually closing the interview on these questions. So what's the next step of the process? Let them tell you what their thinking is. Yeah, Zach, we're actually interviewing 4 candidates. You're one of them. We plan to be making the decision by next Tuesday. Those 2 candidates will come in tomorrow, and then we'll make a decision. So you should hear something from me Tuesday. Okay, so if they didn't say that, you can always say, when do you expect to be making a decision for the hiring process? Because they may not give you all that information. These are questions to find this out. And when's it best to follow up? Okay, so I know you're going to be making a decision next Tuesday. If I don't hear from you by Wednesday, do you mind if I contact you? Sure, no problem, Zach. Which is the best way to contact you? Email, call you, text you. What's the best way? Generally, it's email. Sometimes you get cell phone numbers, very rare, but you never know. Or sometimes you get a home office number. It's really a way to seal the deal and be able to know where you stand in the interview process. The new era. So if you think about it, I've given presentations around these 5 topics, but I'll go through them really quick. Job interviewing's changed a lot. It's gotten a lot tougher. Group interviews are actually a great way to collaborate, to see if they thought about that candidate the way you did as you're sitting there. You can get a second opinion, but they're also cheap. They're a cheap way to move people into the system. Interview, you can bring in 4 candidates for the same position and move them out instead of flying everybody everywhere. So that's really why. Quirky questions. I was actually talking to the event coordinator before I even got in here, and she asked me, how do I answer this question? And I said, I know exactly what they're trying to do. She said, I got asked the questions. She said, they asked me what my favorite ice cream was, and if I could be like that ice cream, well, what would it be? And I said, that was stupid. That's a stupid question. The quirky questions are designed to throw you off your game. They want to invoke creative thinking, how you'll think and act in a weird situation. The worst thing you can do is say, I don't know. That means you're not willing to think, you're not willing to process. It doesn't matter what the answer is. So I could say, well, I think it'd be blueberry because I'm never depressed, so I guess I'd like something of the opposite. So I'd love to have an ice cream that was blueberry, so I think that'd be me. I just made that up. Just give an answer and go with it. How many marbles are in the jar? If you wanted to be an animal, what would it be and why? Skype. Technology's changing interviewing. Skype is tough. I've had to work with candidates before at colleges. It's really a challenge to Skype interview because it's a lot different than what we're used to. Nowadays, even technology, they're doing it on cell phones, believe it or not. I don't know if any of you have had to do that, but you take a job interview and the question pops up and they're recording your voice and then the question goes away. I actually practiced it the other day and it was terrible. Technology is influencing the way we interview. And the competition, I mentioned that. It's tough out there. So you really have to differentiate yourself from the competition. So it's 6:15. What I want to do is I want to take a moment to do the workshop. And the workshop has really been the best feedback I've gotten because we're going to work on 3 or 4 questions. We're probably not going to be here till 7, so don't be alarmed. But I like to go through those 3 questions that we really struggle with. You know, you look at the number 1 questions we ask, if we go back into the presentation, is tell me about yourself. Really would like to give you guys a good answer on that. So think about it from a hiring manager's perspective. Break up into groups where you're around you. So I would take these 4, these 3, and these 4, and break up into groups. And from a hiring manager's perspective, you can come into, no problem, you 4. And then from a hiring manager's, what I don't want you to do in this exercise, I don't want you to think, what answer am I going to give? What are you looking for? Say you own your own company and you want to know somebody and you say, tell me about yourself. Why are you asking that question and what do you expect someone to say? Take a couple minutes, talk with yourselves and determine what that is.